Well, like Kafi said early on, our debaters are seated, and well, some say that considering the social, contract in quote the government has with the people, government probably shouldn't be doing business because then business definitely comes with profitability. But that's not what we see in most of our business or state-owned enterprises. So that is our topic for today's GH debate. Should government be running businesses? And in the past, we've had the Pualugu tomato factories. We've had, the Commander just reopened.
Yes.
We've had a number of state-owned factories. The Workers' Brigade started during the Nkrumah era. And a host of other state-owned enterprises that today are no longer, running. But let me say, though, that the financial ones seem to be doing so well.
Indeed.
SSNIT, for instance, is still in business and doing very well.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Be sure to join in that conversation on all our social media platforms. And, of course, that includes WhatsApp, which is 0288 500 600. Let me introduce quickly our debaters. We have representing the NDC, Koku Mawuli Nane Be. You're welcome. And Eric Amwakuchum is for the New Patriotic Party. And of course, he's a first timer. Thanks for making it here. Aziz Gomda for the Convention People's Party. Gentlemen, you're welcome.
Okay, gentlemen. So let's just run the rules by you for those who, Eric and Coco have been here before, but for your benefit, Aziz. So we have 3 rounds. There's the first round is 7 minutes, second round 5 minutes, third round 3 minutes. And that's your camera that you speak to the people of Ghana who are listening to you. So we'll give you a theme for the first 2 rounds. And then for the last round, it's basically we'll take questions from the viewers, and you can question any of the points that your fellow debaters have made. We'll be giving you signals when it's time for you to wrap up. With a minute to wrap up, we'll give you the signal, and you have to wrap up. So we're going to kick off, first of all, with the Convention People's Party. Our theme for today is, should the state get out of business? And Aziz Gomda will kick us off on GH Debates. Remember, you can send in your questions right now. You think the state should stay in business or just get out? To 0288 500 600, and we'll pose as many of your questions to our debaters on this show. It's 5 minutes to 7, and GH Debates begins right now. Aziz Gomda, 7 minutes, round 1.
Well, first of all, I want to say a very good morning to our viewers. And it's always an honor to be given this opportunity to engage with them as means of, proffering alternatives to national development. And I'm very glad with today's topic, especially coming from a party that believes that the most important issue of governance is to push the interest of the citizens. And it is no surprising that the Constitution of Ghana and Article 1 says the sovereignty of Ghana lies within the people of Ghana, for whose welfare and well-being the exercise of government must be, expressed. Having said that, as a political party, we strongly believe that there's that kind of social contract between the government representing the state and the citizenry. And by doing so, the government must place itself in a position to provide for the basic needs of the individuals that make up the state. And we live in a country, day in, day by, people keep complaining about how government isn't doing certain things right. And the difficulty government has always expressed had to do with the fact that they lack the necessary revenue. In terms of quantum, it is not enough to address some of these issues. And out of this desperation, you see governments taxing people here and there. And if indeed government wants to generate revenue, what prevents government from itself engaging in business to get that revenue so much required to address all the basic needs of the society? And it's not like it's not being done somewhere. It's been successful in other places. And even within our jurisdiction as a country, through the late 1950s to late 1960s, we also saw the tremendous development that happened in this country. Until date, not a single government has been able to achieve more than what was achieved during that period. And just as a matter of fact, during that period, in terms of per capita income, in terms of, literacy rate, in terms of infrastructural development, Ghana was the highest in Africa. And immediately after the overthrow of the legitimate government of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, what didn't we see? Things started dwindling. Through various economic partnership agreements, through various structural adjustment programs, we had relinquished our interest in almost every state institution, handing it over to so-called private sector. What baffles me as a person is that it looks as if within our sphere as a country, anytime we make reference to private business. We are just handing over our country to foreigners to come and loot. And first of all, let me make reference to our mining sector. Let me make reference to our petroleum sector and all the extractive minerals we can have within this country. Government has a minimum stake. And it's not like beyond the minimum stake, they're even taxing enough. Most of these engagements, most of these arrangements, most of these contracts we've had with these people had to come in a form of as though we are begging them to come and extract. At the end of the day, we don't even get anything from it. And all the profits they make is taken out of the country. Today, if you want to point out to countries that are very developed, countries that could be seen as models in the world, I'm sure the very countries that come to mind would be China, would be UAE, would be Norway. I want to take Norway, for instance. Perhaps people will say, okay, let's not talk about China. There's that kind of propaganda of communism in China. Human rights is not thriving in China. UAE is so Islamist and stuff like that. Let's talk about Norway. Norway is currently one of the developed countries in Europe, even comparing Norway to countries like Britain and all the established nations in Europe, although they are not part of EU. But their development is so outstanding. Norway, the state company which is in charge of communication, is the biggest in the country. The energy sector, which is being handled by the state in terms of hydroelectricity and all that, it is the biggest in the country. The oil sector is the biggest in the country. The communication is the biggest in the country. Almost everything is free in Norway, to the extent that even private and state institutions in terms of universities and tertiary educations is absolutely free. To the extent that even if I'm not a citizen of Norway and I go to Norway to study, I don't even pay tuition fee. You get the point? And if that is done somewhere, what prevents us from doing it here? Of course, government involvement in business doesn't necessarily mean you are relegating what's in the private sector to the background, and by not encouraging private sector. I honestly think that if government engages in business, it actually gives private sector the room to develop more. In a sense that, like I mentioned earlier, one of the key issues confronting government has to do with what? Revenue generation. And as desperate as they are, they keep on taxing businesses. And we know how taxation isn't quite doing well for businesses, especially our businesses that are not even finding things easier in terms of energy production and all those things. So the little investments they make in trying to, come out with better ideas to develop themselves and people around them, then you impose so much taxes. But if the government itself is involved in some sort of revenue generation beyond taxation, it releases that burden on business owners. It releases that burden on entrepreneurs. In that case, you create that market where government would also do its work. I do understand that there have been concerns as to how state institutions have not performed well. The truth is that it takes responsibility, it takes maturity, it takes competence, you understand? And it takes, honesty in making sure state institutions work so much. You can have a state institution that is structured as a corporate institution without the unnecessary and undue interference of public officials. If you have a very well-organized structure, everything will work well. And like I told you, that is what is happening in countries like UAE. That's why it's happening in countries like Norway. And countries like Japan and all the rest, Brazil and all, we have those kind of things. And those are the same countries we run to give us assistance. Those are the same countries we run to give us, aid to develop our country. Recently, we heard about the talk of trying to privatize ECG. And people are really scrambling to come and invest in ECG. What that means is that there's a potential of ECG becoming profitable. And if there's a potential of ECG becoming profitable, what prevents Ghana from, or the state from investing in ECG to make sure that ECG becomes a very good corporate institution that can serve the needs of this country? And for you who think government do not have what it takes, let me just cite an example. Under the government of the late Professor Atamos, we all heard of the XTS deal. And in that XTS deal, we were told government was to provide a sovereign guarantee for STS to even take money, sort of a loan, to come and invest in our country. And at least, I'm not a financial expert, but the basic understanding of finance is that before you can serve as a guarantor for someone, you should be credit-worthy yourself, so that in the event the person defaults, you can stand in and pay. If we could stand to give them sovereign guarantee, what could have prevented us from a country or as a state to also go for that kind of thing and invest in our own people? At the end of the day, the dividends, the profits would have stayed in our economy, which would expand our economy. And that is why we feel that it is very key and there's no excuse. And let me also make reference to oil sector. People have often made the case that, we don't have the expertise, we don't have the money. The reality is that the Cosmoses, the Talos, they equally don't have the expertise, they don't have the money. The expertise is in the market. Go and bring it, pay them off. After paying them off, whatever dividends come, bring it to yourself, train your people, build their capacity. And if these basic things are done, I'm sure Ghana would be a better place than we are today, and everybody will live a happy life, including private development, which most people are yearning for.
Aziz Gomda.
Yes, from
It's your first time here. Okay, so that is Aziz Gomda representing the Convention People's Party.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks for those submissions made there. Let me come to you, Koku Nanegbe, for the NDC. So, I mean, you heard Aziz. State enterprises definitely provide those vital services. They provide employment and, you know, on the whole, builds capacity. So why shouldn't the states be doing business?
Thank you, Beswa and Kafri and my colleague debaters. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, I do not think the state will have to be out of business. In fact, it's been established that the state, it is the business of the state to be in business. And I want to put all of that in context. That, in fact, if you check the International Labour Organization website, as we speak today, there is job crisis globally, and particularly it is the emerging economies that are suffering a lot out of this. In 2015, as we speak, there is about 197 million unemployment. And projections are that by the end of this year, it will go up about 2.3 million more. And that's close to about 199 million. And then into 2017, it will be over 200 million. And in fact, to be a government that respects itself so well, a government that means so well for the people of the country, it is your business to be concerned about unemployment, particularly if you are looking at the effects of unemployment, that to create issues of social vices. I mean, and that we always say that an educated nation, or I mean, nation that is well-to-do is a developed nation. You definitely have to find a means to provide for your people, and on that score, that His Excellency President John Mahama and his government are in business to the extent that they are ensuring that companies are provided or are established, and that Ghanaians will get opportunity to be employed. As we speak, the Commander Sugar Factory, for instance, that we've talked about, has provided opportunities, and in fact, for Ghanaians, a minimum of 7,300 direct and indirect jobs. I am just imagining that, for instance, if it's not the case that the government is in business, what would these 7,300 Ghanaians will be doing? Perhaps they would have been engaging in armed robbery, they would have been engaging in all sorts of social vices that wouldn't bode well for the development of our country. If you take other sectors, the establishment of the Kumasi Shoe Factory, that has provided about 200 jobs for Ghanaians, laudable opportunity. You take the Buipe Diamond Cement Factory, for instance, opportunities for the good people of our country. The Buipe Shenot Factory, same opportunities. And I keep saying the Kumasi Jute Factory also is about ready and has opportunity to employ about 3,000 Ghanaians. So it is that the state or government will have to be in that space and be providing for the people. In fact, to an extent, I agree with people who thought that in the past we've not been able to manage the institutions of states, particularly those companies, and that we shouldn't be in that space. Those who attempted to go out of that way and say that we are within the age of golden business didn't do so. And in fact, they ended up selling state institutions. Ghana Telecom is one, and I keep saying the sale of Ghana Telecom alone cost us about 3,000 jobs. As we speak today, that has increased our unemployment rates. The issue of the collapse of Ghana Airways has caused unemployment. And in fact, the fact alone that some few individuals benefited from the sales of those, the assets of those companies, has been a huge toll on our economy and our resources. As we speak today, President John Mahama and his government are doing everything possible to try and see if we are able to have another airline for the states that will create opportunity for the good people of this country. And if to progress, we've had issues that all our resources that we've been taking, or cash crops, or main resources, main commodities, are always exported raw or in raw forms, and that there has to be a means of value addition. And in fact, if you go to Ajirin, Ghana, as we speak today, we have a gold refinery under President John Mahama. It's all, towards the point of value addition, creating jobs, opportunities for Ghanaians, to be employed, and all of those. And that will be making a lot of progress out of that. And that is what we've been saying. And I think that in a government that respects itself and means much for the good people of the country, who have to be in business and be managing the state of affairs. Issues of the past, for instance, had to do about the attitude of workers that largely contributed to the collapse of those countries. And it's an issue we need to address, that where we are today, people must take their work ethics very seriously and contribute to the success of those companies. And that the lukewarm attitude or the bad work ethics some of them have had in the past are the reasons why those companies collapsed. But President John Mahama, who has largely been tagged as Kwame Nkrumah reincarnate, is putting policies in place to be able to have all those companies revived, and that workers will have their attitudes change, and that productivity of our country will go up. And that is the focus. And the plan is that by 2017, 2018, when his mandate is renewed, all of those will be seen, a lot of companies will come on board, employment generation for the good people of our country, value addition to commodities that we've been exporting raw, and that opportunity will be for all Ghanaians, and that they will be employed, they will take parts or enjoy the products that we are making here in Ghana, and by that, we'll be making progress as a nation, Ghana. And I believe strongly that every other person in this country must believe in the president's vision and policies. For instance, his idea about the Made in Ghana campaign is still ongoing. I keep asking that the belief alone, the love alone, to be very critical and be checking the brand of the Made in Ghana products alone, and that if all Ghanaians are critical about it and checking those things, we'll be making a lot of progress. We'll be making, giving opportunities to Ghanaian companies to expand, and that is the way to go. And I'm urging Ghanaians to take critical look and interest in the issue of Made in Ghana campaign, and by that, we'll be making progress in this country.
Thank you very much. Koku Nanagba represents the NDC. In case you just joined us, this is GH Debates. We do it every Wednesday. We look at a trending topic and then we bring the parties together to give us their viewpoints. And today we're looking at state-owned enterprises. And the question we are asking in this round is, should the state get out of business considering what has happened in the past? And we've heard from the CPP, who made extensive reference to it working in other countries, Norway to be a precise example. Then we've also heard from the NDC, who are touting the achievements of this current administration as far as state involvement in business. It's now time for the NPP, New Patriotic Party, to have their 7 minutes on the question of whether the state should get out of business. Representing the NPP is Eric Amwakuchum. Good morning, Eric. Once again, your time starts now.
Good morning.
All right.
Good morning to the viewers out there, and then to my colleagues here. I feel that, we all appreciate that the state, one way or the other, would have some sort of influence when it comes to organizations, enterprises, and probably be involved in some kind of service delivery. And that is where I look at it from. As far as I'm concerned, this is not an ideological debate where we would be sort of talking about capitalism and socialism and everything. Because, of course, we find ourselves in an environment where our situation is quite peculiar in terms of even the provision of simple infrastructure or social amenities for our people. So, I mean, in certain sectors, if it becomes necessary that the government would have to directly impact or influence what happens there, as far as we are concerned as a political party, we have absolutely no problem with that at all. I think that there's evidence of our involvement in the Ayenzu starch factory, the Pualugu tomato factory, the Volta, what's called textiles in Dropom, and all that, to indicate that we actually do not have a problem or there's absolutely no ideological issues when it comes to involvement in state enterprises. Now, I mean, I didn't want to go to this whole debate about MPP, NDC, or even for that matter, the CPP. But there are certain things that I need to actually clear out here. Now, it was under the PNDC-NDC administration, under President Jerry John Rawlings, where 300 state enterprises were divested. And after the diversification, it even pans out that some of the companies actually went under direct control of the First Lady at the time, Nana Kunedu Agyeman-Rawlings. And some of these issues have actually played out in court for everybody to actually appreciate. So as far as I'm concerned, the NDC cannot tout itself as a political party that has actually maintained or done anything to ensure that we secure our state-owned enterprises. Now, of course, when it comes to state-owned enterprises, there are peculiar problems. They have issues with the structure, organizational structure itself, political interference, by appointing cronies and everything. And the structure itself sometimes doesn't allow itself to innovate and improve and do things that would probably be in tandem with modern organizational governance and management trends and all that. But that's notwithstanding. For me, I think that the most important thing for us as a political party is the government actually creating an environment, an enabling environment for the private sector to thrive. Now, in Ghana today, I mean, I was having a discussion with a colleague of mine. If you're involved in any form of business and you're not making at least 70% profit, you might as well keep your money in the bank. Because the cost of capital alone, we are talking about our treasury bill rate around 24%. We're talking about inflation hovering around 19%. You're talking about our rating on the world market in terms of risk rating around B+ or so. And you're talking about all of these things. And you invest your money into a business in an environment where there's, erratic power supply, there's high cost of utilities and all that. If you're not careful, you probably would have more joy by sitting at home, putting your money in a bank account, and making sure that at every 91 days you go and collect your 25%. So that is the reality on the ground. That is what businesses are facing out there. So as far as I'm concerned, government should check these things to ensure that the private sector will thrive. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the CPP president, Nkrumah at the time, did fantastic, had a vision to set up all these enterprises and all that. But if you're talking as far back as 1957, 1960, and some of these things were done, and we are in 2016, for me as a people, it's an indictment on us that we are still talking about doing the same things that was done 60 years ago. We should have actually moved on from there. Now, my brother was talking about Norway. If you look at the commitment and the sort of structures that Norway has put in place, even in terms of innovating its public sector alone, by its commitment to the people and making sure that people have access to proper service delivery, then probably what you should be thinking about is not even setting up a factory, just a factory, but making sure that we have an environment that would make sure that the people, the average Ghanaian who comes out of university or SS or JSS, has the capacity to compete on the same levels as the kids on the global stage. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the NDC will make jives at the NPP for selling what do you call it, Ghana Telecom. But everybody in this country will attest to the fact that the Ghana Telecom at the time and Vodafone as it is today, there's a vast difference. To the point that the president himself, trying to justify the reason why the government had to sell ECG or privatize ECG, used the Vodafone example. So that is, double speak from the NDC. When the president himself goes out there and says that Vodafone, Ghana Telecom, actually metaphors into Vodafone, is a clear indication why ECG, for instance, should be privatized. And you're sitting here using it as an example. Anyway, that notwithstanding, I think that we have to have a proper debate on the government's role in terms of making sure that private sector thrives, areas where the government actually finds itself in, making sure that the right personnel are in there. We have competent individuals who are manning those state enterprises. And then, of course, in terms of even our procurement practices, whereby government actually involves in giving contracts to cronies and friends and families and all of those things, should cease. And if we do that, existing state-owned enterprises will thrive, and we would be able to innovate and make sure that we are creating the right value and adding value to the raw materials that we have.
All right, and that is Eric Amwakuchum from the NPP wrapping up the first round. We're now launching into the second round, 5 minutes each for all of you. And let me come to you, Koku. So, from what we've all heard, it's obvious that the state-owned enterprises definitely haven't done so well. There is this new trend of privatization. Does that imply that it is the last resort? Or is it because that these state-owned enterprises will better serve the purpose if they're in the hands of our private, persons? And if that is the case, what does that say, about our governments?
Thank you, Biswa. When President Mahama got the nod to become a president, he made the point, and in fact, I said it the last time, that he said his government largely will be by PPP arrangement, that is public-private partnership arrangement. And that's how come some of the companies we have, especially because of the experiences we've had in the past, that some private participation is injected into the management of states, companies. We have such an arrangement in the Kumasi shoe factory. We have such an arrangement in the Buipe Shenot processing factory. We have such an arrangement in the Buipe Diamonds Cement. As we speak, that of the Commander Sugar Factory is solely state-owned. So for the records, 100%, and I'm putting on record that the Commander Sugar Factory is 100% state-owned. Government of Ghana borrowing about $35 million from Indian Exim Bank, and that's what we injected. Extra $24 million for cultivation of sugar is also coming in, and all that money, Government of Ghana, public record. And I'm saying that it is by that arrangement, the experience of the past, that is why we are coming by that arrangement. But I'm saying that where we have gotten to, and the issues that the experience we've had in the past, where companies have collapsed, we cannot just say that we will just let things be. Government has a responsibility of providing jobs for the people. And by that, what you do is that you get innovative, you get technical, technology-wise, and to see how you'll be able to move from the past and provide for the people of the country. And that's what the president and his government are doing as we speak today. And that I can understand why some have said that they've moved into the golden age of business. By the end of the day, ending up creating a lot of unemployment in the system. I mentioned Ghana Airways, where they sold the properties to themselves. The issue of attempting to even bring back Ghana International Airlines never worked. They established a starch processing factory. They oversaw the collapse. And many other companies. So that is their thinking, that it was not going to work under them. The issue about railway sector, the sector collapsed, they sold the rail tracks as scraps, and that is the record they bequeathed this country. And I'm saying that President John Mahama is doing what is required as a leader of this country, full of vision. After Kwame Nkrumah, he is the second Kwame Nkrumah reincarnate, who is now trying to revive all the collapsed company of our state. The numbers are there. I mentioned that the Abuasu glass factory is also in the offing. The Salt Pond ceramic factory is also in the offing for reactivation. That is his job. Eric made the point that the president has mentioned somewhere, that Vodafone is now a success. Vodafone, the sale of Ghana Telecom, we lost about 3,000 jobs. And the point must be made that the president was referring to the private participation of the telecom, the Malaysian group, the 30% share they had at the time was what he was referring to, because at the time they came in, there was a lot of, liberalization and expansion of telecommunication, particularly Ghana Telecom, to everywhere. And that was the point. And that the point must also be made that the issue about NDC or PNDC taking a lot of state companies is never the case. If you check, before PNDC took over the reins of government, all those companies were in comatose. And in fact, the record is there, and it has to take a painful decision, to come into an agreement that is known as the Washington Consensus, to ask for divestiture of those companies. That was what happened. And I'm saying that even President Kufuor exited office, he himself, when he was pursuing the Nana Konnedu's and others, before he left office, he went to court. I'm not a lawyer, but he filed a noli prosequi, indicating that the state was no longer interested in prosecuting Nana Konnedu and others. That tells you that it was just for vindictive purposes. And I'm saying that President John Mahama is the president of the moment, full of vision, ensuring the development of our people, changing lives, transforming Ghana, and he's the only person who will be able to do that as we speak.
Thank you very much. Kwaku Nanagba has made judicious use of our resources. They're not state resources, they're private resources, which is time, and he ended right on point. It's 7:25. You're watching GH Debates on GH1 TV with me, Kafui and Beswa, and we are looking at the issue of state-owned enterprises. Should the state get out of business? I know Aziz is dying to come in, but you come in after Eric.
We continue with Eric from the NPP. Eric, so the question that I put to Kwaku, I'm asking, are we doing a lot of privatization today because we think that the state-owned enterprises can better serve their purpose in the hands of the private people? Otherwise, if that is the case, what does that say about our governments?
Well, it's a norm out there nowadays that even in OECD countries, very developed countries, they have, over the period, had to fall on the private sector in terms of partnership, even to raise money, capital for infrastructure projects and to engage in enterprises which basically benefits the state. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with having some kind of private-public partnership or public-private partnerships. What is more important is what actually comes out of that. And if really, in terms of value for money and its impact on our daily existence, makes sense or not. So as far as we are concerned as a political party, we have absolutely nothing against public or private involvement in state-owned enterprises. In terms of the private involvement, what happens normally is that they come in with a lot of expertise. They come in with a lot of know-how in terms of how to even capital. There's quite a lot of performance measurement indicators in there to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do. We all agree that we've had issues with productivity, for instance. So really, some of these things are done to ensure that we have optimum realization or optimum use of the resources that goes into some of these projects. So as far as I'm concerned, the public-private partnership is probably the way to go. Countries have used it to innovate. But what is more important is what is under the purview of the government. In terms of if an individual, for instance, comes into this country, it shouldn't take them 3 months, for instance, to get a permit for to do business. Or when they go to the Registrar General, for instance, and they want to do any kind of business, it shouldn't take them a week or 2 weeks. I mean, the best practices are elsewhere. You can actually go set up, plug and play, and within 3 days, you have your business operating licenses. That's the kind of stuff that we probably should be gearing towards. I mean, making sure that we're using what we have at the moment. And like I keep saying, we're in the golden age of technology. I mean, and we have the benefits of hindsight. We also have the benefit of best practices elsewhere. So if that is where we want to go, fine. But what you need is the competence, the right policies to make sure that this thing would work. And as far as I'm concerned, where I sit, the track record of the NDC does not speak to the fact that they have the competence to manage the economy, for instance, because whilst they are even doing that, even the state-owned enterprises themselves, I mean, as we speak, even when it comes to the ECG, the major problem with the ECG is that companies and organizations are even run by government or government agencies own ECG up to 600, 700 million Ghana cedis. Now, if those monies were actually injected in ECG today, we shouldn't be having the problems that we're having. And that's what Dr. Bawumia even said at the onset of this energy crisis, is that, one, we have competency issues with the government, we have issues with money. The management of the economy itself is in shambles. Now, if the government would do those things and make sure that they are concentrating on what would be beneficial to business, not bringing in taxes that are inimical to business, not bringing in all of these things and making it more difficult for the Ghanaian business to thrive, and then giving all these tax holidays to companies that are coming from elsewhere, and concentrating on giving contracts on sole sourcing and building fence walls for $650,000 and all of these things, and using our money judiciously, by not engaging in issues of giving our money to Wyoming, for instance, by not engaging JIDA and the monies that we have spent with SADA and all of those things, and engaging in practices and concentrating on managing the economy, making sure that our fiscal and monetary policy are on track, and businesses will be able to borrow money, and the cost of capital will come down, inflation will come down, the depreciation of the cedi will stop, then businesses will thrive. And that would even be of benefit to the so-called state enterprises that they are trying to create. So as far as I'm concerned, that is the most important aspect of governance, making sure that the atmosphere is right, the environment is right, there's a conducive atmosphere for business. Government does not engage in taxing everything that, I mean, basically is not bolted down. Then businesses will thrive, and it would actually trickle down to the public sector. As we speak, even when it comes to the cocoa industry, the local cocoa producing companies that add value to the cocoa that we get, do not even have the raw material to work. So really, in terms of all of these things, I mean, we are making reference to the state-owned banks, for instance. How many of these state-owned banks have been sold under the NDC administration? How many of these banks have been collapsed and have to go through all sorts of new managerial changes by virtue of the fact that it's incompetent?
Thank you very much. Eric Amachum from the MPP. Round two is just about going to be done with Aziz Gomda. The question for him again, please.
Indeed. Yes. So Aziz, I'm just asking the question why we're privatizing so much today, and if indeed it's because that the purpose for which we're setting up the private or the state-owned enterprises will be better served if it finds its way to the private sector.
Well, first of all, I think the very reason why today privatization seems to be the key is, to an extent, the laziness of government. Like my friend would always tell me, that in terms of revenue generation, the most easiest and laziest way to do is to be taxing people here and there. But if you really want to come out with better governance, you ought to have the expertise, you ought to have the competence, like it's been seen previously. And it's not like it's not been done, like I keep on saying. And let me also make this point. You see, it's not like as a political party, we are against private involvement. But the reality is that most private individuals or private entities are inspired by profit making. There's nothing altruistic about what they do. they don't enter into business for the good of the citizens. They enter into business for maximizing profit. Unless it is only government that would be in a better position to enter into business to better the lot of the citizens because it has that social contract with the people. And woe betides government, woe betides government if government fails to deliver on that kind of social contract as in pertaining the terms of that social contract. They'll be kicked off, and no government wants to be kicked off. That alone should be an incentive for why government should be on its toes. And like I'm saying, when we were coming out with the Akosombo hydroelectric dam, it was a public-private partnership. But public-private partnership is not the kind of partnership we see today, where government, in one way or the other, doesn't even call the shots. It is the private institution or the private investor that calls the shot. If it's about getting revenue to making sure state institutions are running effectively, I think one of the best ways is we have state institutions that can be publicly listed on the stock exchange, where even Ghanaians themselves can invest in terms of shares. Government can still maintain the majority shareholders. Private sector will still be given the opportunity. But the moment you relinquish everything into the hands of the private sector, the fear is that there is a chance of exploitation. And you see the private sector we are talking about, I'm sorry about that. Is it the kind of private partnership we see under MPP NDC, where before MPP left in power, we saw the kind of mining agreements they had with multinational corporations, signing the stabilization agreements that totally rendered everything to their hands. They could not even meet environmental standards, destroying the livelihoods of people, polluting water bodies, creating a lot of damages. People could not even farm. Go to Obuasi. Let me give an example. For you to know that private sector is not the way, go to Prestea today. Go to Obuasi today. And go to any of the big mining communities in Ghana. You would realize that it is so devastating. If they tell you the amount of money these mining companies make, and yet you see the extent of development in these communities, you would weep. And I'm using this literally. You would weep. For instance, the very first time I went to Prestea, I was like, growing up, Prestea was one of the gold mining hubs in Ghana. But if you see the extent of development there, you would be surprised. All because I keep on saying the private sector is not strategically positioned to pursue the interests of the citizens. And the only institution, insofar as we are concerned, is the government. Of course, the government might have its limitations. And in those limitations, we can invite a minimum participation of private sector in terms of partnership. But not just to sit down as we see today, where PPP is about bringing in your own cronies. And at the end of the day, it's about the percentage and the kickbacks you get. That should not be the way forward. And today, Ghanaians must realize that MPP and NDC haven't done so well when it comes to that. And I have been surprised by the comment made by MP, but he seemed to be alluding to the fact that indeed public sector involvement in business is key. And he talks about the fact that it's not supposed to be an ideology or ideological debate. I think it is everything about ideological debate. Because ideological debate or ideology is basically which is the way forward. One school of thought thinks that the state must take increased role, must participate, must involve itself in ensuring that revenue is generated more. And by doing so, reduce that kind of burden on people having to pay tax to meet the revenue demands of the state, to honor its obligations to its citizens. And all these things could be done perfectly if we have very strong regulators, an independent regulator who would not be interfered by the skirmishes and whims and caprices of government. Like, for instance, we have a current arrangement in the petroleum sector. We have the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, which is supposed to be an active player in terms of also getting licensing and involving in exploitation and production. And you have the Petroleum Commission, which is supposed to be a regulator. The reality is that there's room for improvement. But if you have those kind of arrangements, it makes it quite easier for both governments and for both, maybe in this instance, for both the state institution and private individuals to work hand in hand and create the enabling environment for everybody to do their bit in making sure that Ghana gets to where it's supposed to be. Because it's long overdue. We've been independent for more than 50 years today, and yet still nothing is to write home about.
Thank you very much. Aziz Gomda, wrapping up round 2 for today's GH Debates. Our topic is, should the state get out of business? And you've heard from the parties from round 1 and round 2. Round 3 is where we take your questions, and we also have some questions that we'll be asking the debates. We're going to kick off round 3 with Eric Amwa Kuchum. Let me kick off with something that Aziz alluded to earlier about it being everything to do with ideology. He believes that the way somebody behaves is as a result of how the person orients their thinking. And you disagree with that?
Well, I mean, he would not sort of draw me into an ideological debate.
Well, I want to get your thoughts on
because the point really is that the NPP is a liberal democratic party.
So that's ideology right there.
No, listen, yeah. So the liberalism tells you that, I mean, if for one reason or the other there's certain things that we feel that would inure to the benefit of the Ghanaian people, we will do it. I mean, our track record actually says that for a party that's supposed to be liberal democratic and actually capitalist in inclination, we are the party that actually has managed to bring about social interventions. We are talking about metro mass transport, we are talking about the capitation grant, we are talking about school feeding, we are talking about all of these things, national youth employment and all of these things. These are things that under normal circumstances, in the normal sense of an ideological orientation, we probably wouldn't have done it. So really, this whole thing about, I mean, it's taking me back to my A-level government class. This whole thing about being so strict or straitjacketed when it comes to ideology is a thing of the past. Now, even in countries where they have touted themselves as communists to the hilt, they've actually opened up. You understand? So really, you go with the times.
But
now,
isn't his argument with Norway sound?
No.
They must be doing what they're doing based on some ideology.
No, listen, that's my point. The point really is that even when you go to Norway, there's also an existence of a private sector. You understand? So you can't sit here and give the impression that every single thing under the sun in Norway is actually owned by the state. That is not the case. So really, my point really is that it is not about ideology. As far as I'm concerned, the average ordinary Ghanaian on the street is not interested in an ideological dispensation. They are interested in the fact that they can go to school, they can pay for their children when they board, they can have proper health care, they can have education for their children and themselves, they can start a business and it will thrive and it will generate enough for them to employ people. The average Ghanaian wants employment.
So it's not important for us?
Yeah, so for me, as far as I'm concerned, when we start that debate, then we probably will not finish today. But the point really is that these are the germane issues, that the bread and butter issues that are important to the average Ghanaian. They want to make sure that the ball of Kenke stays the same, that they don't pay 12 cedis for an alone car of Gary, for instance.
So it doesn't matter who...
It does not really matter.
It doesn't matter that Ghana has 0% in shares in Ashanti mining, and between you and the NDC, you sold all the controlling interests.
Let me make my point.
In what we tout as, Ghana, we're a mining company, but we've sold it.
Look at what you're talking. Let me tell you something. Like, these are things that we can sort of have a conversation about as a country. Right. Do we want to sort of take back or rein back our interest in the extractive sector? If I have to have a personal opinion, probably yes, we should. Okay, where have we gone wrong? We have gone wrong in certain situations. We can deal with those things. Do we have the benefit of hindsight, whereby there are certain things that we are doing today that we probably shouldn't do? Let's have those conversations. But as far as I'm concerned, in terms of a track record of a party, a political party, any political party that has come into this country to bring about social interventions, giving maternal, pregnant women access to go to the hospital for free, it is the MPP. Okay. And it's not about ideology.
All right,
okay. Eric, many thanks for your time. Let me come to you, Aziz. So, and it's interesting that you talk about that social contract the government has with the people. I alluded to that early on. So could we probably say that what government does now is more of social enterprises, where, you know, profits accrued is plowed back into the business to get it running? Meanwhile, business is supposed to be about profitability.
Yeah, of course. The point is that all the state institutions or state enterprises, they have succeeded somewhere after that kind of arrangement. You know, the key thing is the economic viability of the projects. Of course, if you have a state enterprise which does not avail itself into proper financial and prudential financial management, it will collapse. So at least it should be an arrangement where whichever profit is made, there will be a retention regime, in a sense that part of it will be reinvested in the company to keep it going. and whatever is left would also be paid into the treasury. That would be disbursed to various institutions that help in developing the country. And having addressed that issue, I want to get back to the issue of how this has to do with ideology. You see, I think citizens of this country, electors of this country, deserve better from political parties, in a sense that ideology is a means to an end. MPP and DCCP would all come out today and say, if we come into power, this is what we will do. Now, what Ghanaians need to know is that what means to which we would employ to get in there. We are saying that to get there, the state must take an increased responsibility. The state must get involved more. If you think otherwise, so be it. But don't tell me you are a free market-oriented government or political party and you try to take pride in the socialist interventions you have made. Basically, it means that you think, after all, there's a way forward in the social sector, the state taking part in the entrepreneurial process. And mind you, I never suggested in any way that the private sector doesn't have a role. To the extent that I even made reference to the fact that today, as a country, one of our biggest investment is the Akosombo hydroelectric project. It was a partnership between a U.S. company and Ghana that even led to the establishment of the Volta aluminum company, Valco. Even if you trace to the construction of the Tema Township, the construction of the Akosombo Hambo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah alluded to the fact that indeed we require private investment, but it should not be something of exploitative. It should be a partnership.
Okay.
And being a partnership, it means government should be calling the shots, because it is for the citizens of this country government enters into a contract. It is not for the interest of the private institutions. And for that matter, we shouldn't enter into a private or public-private partnership that would, in reality, hand over everything of this country, like we have seen in the sale of Vodafone, and we're equally seeing in the attempt to sell ECG to private investors. And you even see government communicators doing the PR work for that. And I think that is quite unfortunate.
Aziz, just listen to this roll call. So, Pomadzi Tomato Factory, Commander Sugar Factory, it's back now. Asuchari Sugar Factory, Bolgatanga Meat Factory, Kumasi Jute Factory, Kumasi Shoe Factory, Ghana Railways Corporation, Ghana Airways, Tema Dry Dock, Tema Sanyo, Tema Steel Works, Tema Batteries, Tema Paints Factory, Tema Cold Stores, Tema Food Complex, Aboso Glass Factory, Bonsa Tires, Kede Match Factory, Suhum Garment Factory, Ghana Fishing Corporation with 21 trawlers, SNIT, ADB, NIB, Ghana Commercial Bank, State Insurance Company, State Distilleries, Takrady Boatyard, Takrady Cocoa Processing Corporation, Tema Cocoa Processing Corporation. This is a list of state-owned enterprises. Are you saying that it was all hunky-dory, they were all working well, and the coup just destroyed all of them?
That is the reality. They were doing very, very well. And you see...
Is this revision of history?
Well, it is something that should guide us. It is a reality in history we need to go back and take into account and see how it can guide us. And the point is that before we got there, we had a strategic plan. We had the first 5 years strategic plan. And we also had the 7-year development plan, which was supposed to usher us into a new paradigm. Unfortunately, the coup came and drilled everything. Okay. And let me put this before viewers.
In 30 seconds.
I'll try my hard. You see, today, the reality is that government is really suffering when it comes to revenue mobilization and generation. And we all saw that during the Jumso crisis. It was more of not having enough money to meet the demands of power generation. Are you telling me that if these institutions or if these enterprises were working to full capacity, it wouldn't have added so much to our revenue box? And like I'll keep on saying, that would even reduce the burden on taxpayers. So we don't have any excuse at all. Okay. We have the resources. Okay. We have the men. Given the opportunity to be trained, they can make their skill be impacted on these resources for it to reflect and manifest in the well-being of every Ghanaian.
Thank you, Aziz.
And that should be the way forward.
Thank you very much. Now, Koku, there's a lot of questions for you. You have 3 minutes. We're going to go to as many of them as possible. Government should stay in business and do business. Then why are you getting out of ECG?
I laid the basis that as much as we can, there should be a PPP, public-private partnership. And in fact, that with the ECG, we all agree that at the lower end, where the biggest issue for ECG has to do about their billing and ability to recoup monies.
The MD
electricity
said the
bills.
billing software is okay. So what are you talking about?
Sorry?
You just said that the billing software is okay. Where does billing come in?
No, the last time I checked, the leadership of ECG has even apologized to the good people of Ghana and said that they were going to solve that problem. The Minister of Power, in fact, has formed a committee that was prior to the release of the PURC asking that the software be withdrawn. So there is a basis to such an action.
Government is not can run business. I mean,
Government.
I saw an ad in
government-
yesterday's graphic about a call for people to think about a national airline. We run Ghana Airways to the ground.
Exactly.
What is the business
So,
of government going to set up a new airline?
Thankfully, those who mismanaged it and sold the properties to themselves are no longer in charge.
NDC
And they-
also sold off so many of our assets.
I'm
And
saying-
the last 2.5% that we owned
see,
was sold by NDC.
we
NDC
can
won.
go into that debate. And
NDC
I'm
two,
saying,
I beg your
and I'm
pardon.
saying
You sold it.
that
You sold in Southern Canary to
before-
the 31st
before
December Women's Movement.
NDC took over.
You sold GNTC
those
Kanda to
companies
private people.
were in comatose. You understand? To an extent that when the economy was grinding to a halt and PNDC took over, the World Bank and the IMF had reached an agreement with us that before they help us come out of the problems in the 80s, we need to put those companies on divestiture. And it was a very painful decision at the time. And that was how come we arrived at the Washington consensus that let's privatize those companies. You understand? It was
Is that
not
not because
just
we
for
had
anything.
run, we had run these, enterprises
Exactly.
down.
Not by the
so-
PNDC.
and so we
by
had
the
no
past.
choice.
And I said that, see, those things happen because of our own attitude as Ghanaians, that we do not see those companies as our own. We think that it's for the state. To date, we see some of those things. Some of the drivers in the ministry, department, and agencies, they handle vehicles as if it's not just because it's not their own. They don't, not with care. All other workers, they see the job as somebody else, not theirs. They go to work as and when they want, and that shouldn't be the case.
Because as up till today,
Just
nobody
because-
is even putting in measures to check all of these
No,
things.
as you speak. In fact, we had an opportunity with the deputy local government minister yesterday, and he made the point. Sorry, employment minister yesterday. He made the point that they are looking critically about the issue of productivity because it's part of the arrangement of single spine salary structure. And
Okay.
as we speak, they are introducing it, for instance, that any public worker who goes into an office should clock in
All right.
and clock out.
Okay.
And so those things are happening.
So attitude issues.
Exactly.
Okay.
But in rounding up, I must make the
rounded
point.
up already, sir.
Yes,
Papa
I'm
Dide,
just rounding
we
up.
have loads of questions, especially for you, because your party is in power. Let me quickly say this one. So, Nash Shoko says that all of you were talking about everything but neglecting some of the things that are affecting us as a people. Please ask the NDC rep, since they're in power now, what they are doing about the monies promised to the voluntary leavers of GPHA, but still hasn't been given them after more than 12 years now, in which her dad is part of, and it's affecting them.
But I think that there is a ministry in charge, a Ministry of Transport, and they can.
They should route their inquiries
exactly.
there. Okay.
And I think that so long as it's an approved money, I mean, that should be given to them as compensation. There shouldn't be any difficulty at all.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this up right now. Just quick questions. Commander, resurrection. Good idea?
It's a good idea, but I doubt. I don't want to be pessimist, but the issues surrounding its resurgence and all those things is quite shameful.
Good idea? Resurrection?
Well, in principle it is, but I mean, like I said, and the government doesn't own 100% of Commander. We have to make that clear.
Substantiate
The government,
You don't get
the
away.
Indian government, right, paid about $35 million. The government invested $1 million plus this land and the facility and all that. That is meant to be operated for, I think, a period of 25 years,
Okay.
so that it's returned
Almost like a
to the
concession.
government. So really, how can that be state-owned? Now, all these things that he mentioned, diamond,
Yeah.
cement, and share nuts, and all of those things, these are not state-owned enterprises. These are enterprises that are owned by individuals with some government support. Now, so really, even
individual?
their definition of
PPP.
state-owned enterprise in itself, a PPP is not a state-owned enterprise.
Oh.
A PPP is not a state-owned enterprise, is it?
It's a partnership.
It's a partnership.
Public-private
Right,
partnership.
so, I mean, really,
my
even
submission in the context in which I
the
submitted it.
definition of
You
itself
have
is
issued
something
the
that they
definition.
have actually even gone
New
on.
national airline.
As far as, listen, as far as...
Under MPP, GIA disappeared.
listen,
Are you happy with it coming back as a national airline? Answer
listen,
my question, sir.
Everything that would sort of project the image of this country, I'm happy. I'm
So you're
all
happy
it.
for a new airline?
Once it's not something that is going to go to cronies and is going to
Okay.
actually even be a JIDA or a SADA situation.
Is that what
I'm
happened
more
with
than happy.
GIA? Is
No,
that
so
what happened
really,
with
as far as
GIA?
I'm concerned, as far as I'm concerned, I said earlier, the MPP introduced the National Health Insurance Policy for the average Ghanaian to benefit.
Okay.
And we are supposed
It's
to
not a
be
state-owned
that,
enterprise,
yes.
is it?
It's, no, but I'm just using it as an example.
Yeah, well,
Right.
that's the
All of
track.
this, we would bring back
Reconcile.
teacher training allowances.
Okay.
We'll bring back.
Now he's bringing it at the
That
start.
is what
All right, Eric.
political party to do to in your
Thank you very much.
Its people.
That's our debate. Thank you
never
very
had
much.
my last-
Oh, no, you had your last say. You've spoken already. He was just making some quick comments. We are done. We're done. My producer will kill me.